Chapter 1. Don't just stand there. Gospelize. But you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in all Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth. After he said this, he was taken up before their very eyes, and a cloud hid him from their sight. They were looking intently up into the sky as he was going, when suddenly 2 men, dressed in white, stood beside them. "Men of Galilee," they said, "why do you stand here looking into the sky? This same Jesus, who's been taken up from you into heaven, will come back in the same way you have seen him go into heaven." Acts chapter 1, verses 8 through 11. Imagine experiencing that moment when Jesus gave his disciples the final charge to go into the world and spread the good news to everyone, everywhere. You would have just spent the previous 40 days reveling in the shocking joy of Jesus' resurrection from a horrific death, and now his pierced, beautiful feet are leaving the ground. Jesus starts floating upward, upward, upward. He goes higher and higher, finally disappearing into the gentle clouds that waft across the deep blue Judean sky. Then a voice startles you out of what feels like a dream. You turn to see 2 men dressed in white who've appeared out of nowhere. "Why do you stand here looking into the sky?" they ask. Their pointed question reminds you that Jesus has given you, in his final words, a promise and a purpose. The promise and purpose Jesus offered his disciples set in motion a revolution that has continued to this day. First, he promised that the Holy Spirit would soon be upon them and that he would bring with him a divine power, not to set up an earthly kingdom, but to advance a spiritual one. Next, he gave the disciples a purpose, to be his witnesses, starting where they were, Jerusalem, and then spreading farther and farther away, to Judea, then Samaria, and then the ends of the earth. Finally, Jesus disappears into a cloud, and the disciples just stand there awestruck, staring into the sky. It all happens so quickly. But God doesn't give them the luxury of sitting around processing what just took place. Instead, 2 angels immediately appear on the scene and ask why they are still there. In essence, they're saying, don't just stand there, spread the good news. They were reminding the disciples and all their spiritual descendants, which includes us, that there's a mission to accomplish, advance the gospel, a plan to accomplish it, start where they were and expand to the ends of the earth, and a deadline to accomplish it by when Jesus comes back on a cloud. The angels reminded them it was time to do what Jesus told them to do. Wait for the Holy Spirit and then get busy with the mission. And that's exactly what they did. 10 days later, immediately after being baptized with the Holy Spirit, they stood up and started telling everyone the gospel. As a result, 3,000 were added to the number in one day. Acts chapter 2, verse 41. But they were just getting started. In every chapter of the book of Acts, we see the gospel powerfully advancing. In Acts chapter 1, Jesus commissioned his disciples to take the gospel across the street and around the world. In Acts chapter 2, the disciples' tongues were set on fire with the gospel. In Acts chapter 3, God used Peter to first heal a man's broken body and then share the gospel to heal his broken soul. In Acts chapter 4, the power of prayer shook a building, and the power of the gospel shook an entire city. In Acts chapter 5, the apostles were commanded to keep quiet, but they never stopped preaching the gospel. In Acts chapter 6, the gospel grew and multiplied across Jerusalem because the apostles prioritized prayer and preaching and delegated everything else. In Acts chapter 7, Stephen was stoned for declaring the gospel. In Acts chapter 8, the Holy Spirit prompted Philip to chase down a chariot and preach the gospel to an Ethiopian eunuch, who then took the message to Africa. In Acts chapter 9, Jesus commissioned Saul to declare the gospel to the Gentiles. In Acts chapter 10, the gospel transformed Gentiles.